Hi angels, and welcome back to my channel. So today I want to talk about something that's pretty interesting. You could tell it's interesting by the title. Actually, I was really impressed by the title that I came up with because it's such like an eye-catching title. I want to talk about what sex teaches us about existentialism. It took me 20 times to say that word correct and I nailed it. Okay, so I want to talk about that. And when we're talking about today, we're not looking at sex through a lustful lens. We're just looking at it from an introspective, like third party point of view. So I was thinking about sex, but in an introspective way, and I was thinking of how most people, when they have it, they don't do it for means or byproduct of something most of the time. Most of the time, people just do it for fun. Now, this video isn't to debate on whether that's right or wrong, because it's just not, this video is just not about that. But I was just thinking how most people usually, when they do it for the pleasure of it and nothing else. And because of how I was raised, that concept is very new to me, because I was always raised in a way that taught me that when you do something, you can't really do it for the sake of feeling good. Feeling good, happiness can be a byproduct of what you do, but you can't do something just for the sake of being happy, because if you do, you're lazy. If you do that, then you're not being productive. If you do that, then you're wasting your time. You can't just be happy just to be happy. It has to be some type of cost. I was always taught about the cost of being happy rather than expected, or rather than able to just be happy. Obviously, there's more things than sex that allows you to just enjoy, happiness, like eating food. You could get pleasure by that. The byproduct of it is to keep you alive. But, some people eat for the sake of being happy. But I realized that most people, when we live our lives, we always live our life expecting an end goal, or we're always living our lives in search for meaning, and we rarely just live our lives for the sake of feeling happiness or the sake of feeling pleasure. And some people may say, oh well, in your life you have to have a purpose. You can't just seek and chase pleasure or happiness, right? And they may even associate chasing happiness as if someone is like a substance abuser, seeking happiness, seeking pleasure. They might associate it with that same type of cyclical, bad habitual pattern, right? Pattern of behavior. But it's kind of sad that when most people think about, living a fulfilled, happy life, they always associate with people trying to find happiness through unhealthy means, like substance abuse, like being a phone addict, scrolling, finding pleasure and happiness through that. But there's ways that every day you can find pleasure and happiness in your life through simple things. It doesn't have to be destructive. It doesn't have to hurt you in any way. You could find happiness just by waking up and making a sandwich, You can find pleasure and enjoyment and fulfillment just by talking to your friends and having a conversation. You don't always have to do these huge deeds, or you don't have to always contribute, a lot of things to find happiness in that. It's rare for people to live their lives or do things for the sake of doing it. Like, for example, in college, there's a lot of people that they're studying and they're majoring in things that they don't really want. And I think this is the majority of college students. They're majoring in things that they don't want, but they're doing it for an end goal. They're not studying for the sake of gaining intellect. They're studying to please their parents, or they're studying to, become something that they believe other people would admire, and not for their own, personal fulfillment. Or they're also doing this to chase and to find a meaning, But I think that's a really, I wouldn't say bad, but I don't think it's the ideal way to live your life, because anything you chase, there's a reason why you're chasing it, because you don't have it. if you had it, you wouldn't be chasing it. Meaning in life, the more you chase it, the more you're not going to find it, because you can't find meaning. You know, you could make things meaningful, but meaning in itself, I don't think you could find that. I think you make things meaningful. And like I said, not big things. Big things don't have to be meaningful. You could find meaning and happiness and purpose in little things that you do. The only reason why we chase meaning is because we know that our lives, I'm not going to say that our lives are meaningless, but we understand that no amount of contributions, no amount of, intellect we have, no amount of luxuries we have, we're not going to be able to keep it. And it doesn't matter how smart or, how powerful we are. At the end of the day, one day we're not going to exist on this earth. So ultimately, I'm not going to say it means nothing, but it's not as meaningful as we believe it is. It doesn't matter how big your accomplishment is. It's not going to, I don't want to say satisfy the loneliness in your heart, but it's not going to suffice, it's not. So I think that's the reason why we chase meaning and we give meaningless things meaning, because they're meaningless. They amount to nothing. So we have this constant chase because I think most of humanity, we all are carrying a void within ourselves. So we use these superficial things, power, luxury, all of these things to fill the void. When we get it, it doesn't suffice. How can it suffice? It's not sustainable. It's what is it going to do? It can't do anything for us. And that's why I say we have to practice finding meaning in small things. We have to, instead of chasing meaning, we should do things that's for the sake of happiness in itself, rather than the byproduct of happiness. We think that achieving things, once we achieve this, we will feel happy. But why can't we just do things for the sake of happiness instead of looking for something to be the byproduct of happiness? And I start to think of that. And I think that's the best way to live our life. Another thing that I was thinking was how creation is the most meaningful thing on this earth. Doesn't matter what you do in your life. I don't care if you're like Mike Tyson or like one of the greatest. You will never be able to surpass creation itself. Creation is so meaningful that it doesn't need a meaning to give it meaning. Creation doesn't have like a meaning, it just is, That's why there's no beginning to it, there's no end, you can't really track it. It doesn't need a meaning to exist, it just exists. And that, by default, that in itself shows how meaningful it is. It doesn't need anything to justify its existence. I think we should interact with life in that same regard. We should just live our life for the sake of happiness instead of trying to find fulfillment. And some people might misunderstand what I'm saying. I don't think that you should live your life blindly and chase happiness, because that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying instead of trying to do things for the byproduct of happiness, be happy while you're doing it. Like, for example, if you're doing your schoolwork, for me, let's say, if I'm doing my schoolwork, I don't want to think, if I get an A, I'll be happy. I'm going to think in terms of, okay, let me still find happiness as I'm studying. Let me find happiness in struggling with this course. Let me find happiness in asking my professors for help, even though I'm nervous to ask them. Let me find happiness in these little things, because once I get that A, it's like the dopamine, it's going to rush to my brain, but then after a while, it's going to fade away. And the A, I'm going to adapt to the A. I'm going to adapt to the high of the A. So then the A, it doesn't mean anything. So instead of trying to find happiness after doing something, after achieving it, let me just trust the process. Let me find happiness and pleasure in the process as I'm doing it. I think that's the best way to live your life, because if you're always chasing things to give you happiness, to give you meaning, you'll never be fulfilled. It can't work. And the way I live my life, I think for me, I made videos about death and passing. Well, I'm going to just use the word passing. I've made videos about passing and how I've become more comfortable with the idea of me passing. because everyone should, because we all are going to pass at one time. And I realized that the best way to live life is just to enjoy it. And enjoy it doesn't, like I said, I'm going to reiterate, doesn't mean chasing the highs, It doesn't mean only trying to seek the things that we accept societally as, happy and comforting. It means through the struggles, through the chaos, you could still feel happiness. You could still feel pleasure. You don't have to have sex or eat, the most sugary sweets to feel pleasure. You could just find happiness in living your life. And I know that might sound bizarre to some people, but I think the only reason why it does is because the only reason why we experience negative emotions is because we identify with it. Most people don't realize that emotions, that's not us. When we feel sadness, we aren't sad. We are just experiencing sadness. So once you detach yourself from the emotion, you wouldn't feel it. And I know this because I've been doing this more recently. Like, if I get annoyed, I feel the annoyance, crawling up and trying to possess my mind. But then I detach from it. That doesn't mean I don't validate my feelings. That doesn't mean I don't acknowledge it. I acknowledge it. I'm not a robot. It's okay to feel negative emotions, but I don't let it consume me. And I'm able to still find happiness. Well, let's not use happiness. I'm able to still feel and find gratitude and enjoyment when I'm feeling annoyed, because now my baseline, it doesn't matter how angry I get, my baseline, the thing that directs me in my life is to know that, wow, I'm on this earth, so I'm happy for life. If I'm angry, yes, I'm angry, but I'm living, I'm here, I'm on earth. So I'm that gratitude and happiness for life, now it overcomes any negative feelings I experience. And like I said, that doesn't mean that I don't experience negative emotions. I do. The problem isn't negative emotions. It's the extent to which you let it consume you, the extent to which you let it hinder the way you interact and navigate through your life. That's the issue, okay? The negative emotions, we're humans. They come and go, just like positive. Nothing wrong with that. The biggest takeaway today is to understand that you are allowed to feel happiness just for the sake of. You don't need to accomplish something to feel happy. You could find happiness with anything. You are allowed to feel happiness. You don't have to earn it. Just by existing, it gives you that birthright to experience happiness. Maybe not at all times because you're human, but majority. Why? Because the greatest gift that you could ever receive is being birthed on earth. And I think that's something that everyone should feel happy with. And because of that, anytime you feel negative emotion, that feeling of, wow, I'm on this earth, this is a gift, that should overcome any negative emotions. And that should make you feel this baseline of happiness, of pleasure, without searching for it. That in itself is meaningful. That is the biggest meaning you'll ever derive from your experience on earth. So, yeah. I hope this video helps, and thank you for watching. Bye, angels. Love you guys.